All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the final Talent Scout webinar of our April Talent Draft. I know it's May, but we're ending with a bang, and we have Dr. Sandeep Krishnamurthy with us. Welcome, Sandeep. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
Great, awesome to have you. Should I call you Sandeep or should I call you Dr. Krishnamurthy?
Sandeep's just fine. Thank you.
All right. Sandeep is the dean of the Cal Poly Pomona Business School and Graduate School of Business. Before that, he had actually spent 2 decades up here in the Seattle area, building out the University of Washington and UW Bothell School of Business. And one of the things that has been really powerful about Sandeep is that he actually forge partnerships with a lot of the big companies in the Seattle area, Microsoft, T-Mobile, Avanade. And he has taken that kind of hands-on approach, both between partnerships with the business community and brought that down to Cal Poly Pomona as he's standing up and really revolutionizing how Cal Poly Pomona thinks about their business school. Today, it's actually one of the largest business schools in the country with, I think, more than 5,000 students. And
Yes.
he has a unique front row seat to this kind of fascinating change that's happening in higher education, particularly as we see AI entering the picture both on the education side and on the employment side. And if you're not following him, he has a fantastic Substack, and he wrote an incredible piece called on Recombinant AI Fluency, which is kind of the centerpiece of our talk today. So welcome, Cindy.
Thanks a lot, Nikesh. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. You want to just, I mean, I gave kind of the high level
Sure.
overview and introduction, but give us a little bit about your background and what makes you tick and what gets you excited, where you came from, and how you ended up in this awesome position down at Cal Poly Pomona.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I'm so delighted to be here. I am, you know, really a very privileged to have this role as dean, where I get to, help shape the future of over 5,000 students. My undergraduate was in India in chemical engineering. I went to IIT Bombay, then got an MBA in India, and then my journey in the US has primarily been in higher education. And I was at UW Bothell for a long time, first as faculty member, then as dean. And I think today I feel like um, even in the last couple of years, everything has changed. The assumptions that we were making about higher education, the assumptions that we were making about the labor markets and what people really care about, it seems like everything is changing right in front of our eyes. And I think the statistics are very clear. I think we are currently going through a situation where a lot of students graduating from college uh, are graduating into a very tough labor market. And the early career job prospects are changing, just as we speak. It feels like AI capabilities are scaling up in very significant ways every single year. And the companies are, as everybody here knows, especially the large tech companies, are going through trade-offs of whether they should invest in AI infrastructure or in the people. And that is leading to all sorts of interesting effects. But I think the bigger thing is, for me as an educator, as a leader of a business school, what I'm thinking about is what is AI and how is it different from all the different technological revolutions that we have seen. So I remember, studying the launch of the internet with different browsers, the smartphone, et cetera, et cetera. So I will meet parents, for example, or business leaders, and they'll typically ask me this question: isn't this just another technology revolution? Isn't this just another tool that is being added? And I think that is something that I want to start off with. That I think the change that we are seeing is not just the addition of a tool. AI, as we currently experience it, is not just the addition of say Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Word or something like that. That is not the moment. Um, Instead, what we are encouraging is for people to understand that AI is a pervasive presence. It is best understood as a presence rather than as a tool, which means that, AI, of course, which is not monolithic. Even there is differences between generative AI and other forms of AI, but I think it's best understood as having Einstein in your living room. You just have a very interesting person, and it's up to you how you can interact, how you extract information, how you engage that person. And Einstein might get bored and leave your house, or you can get amazing information from this person. That is the kind of thinking that's currently going on. So typically, if we reduce AI to a tool, what happens is we get into a training mindset. We basically say, oh my God, I just need to drill on all the processes and procedures on how AI works, and then I'm going to make it to the other side. That is typically how tool training works, right? But the reality is, we have, so many different AI systems already, and each of them is strong in some aspects. So what I've been talking about with this concept of recombinant AI fluency is, there is no such thing as becoming an expert in ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that. Instead, we're encouraging students to be problem oriented. Try to understand what the problem is all about and try to figure out how do you get the strengths of different AI systems to help you solve that problem. How do you overcome a challenge that an actual business faces? And how do you figure out a way to uh, get the power of different AI systems to work together in order to make some reality happen. And of course, this is something that as a learner and as an educator, we feel it's exactly what the students need, but it is not well aligned with the reality that students might see in an organization, for example, where
Mm-hmm.
they tend to have a contract with one LLM, but really purely from a learning standpoint, even there are smaller products, and the example I always give is Notebook LM. Google has a product called Notebook LM, and a lot of students are not aware of it because there's so much hype on ChatGPT, and our university has a contract where all students have access to the pro version of ChatGPT. So they're so focused on that. And so, how is it that, um, we help people even become aware that there are different intelligences? It is plural. So in which case, how are you leveraging all of these? And then how do we create, a big shift in higher education, which is moving from analytical point of view to integrative point of view, right? Don't just get down into analysis of one small thing. Instead, think of how do you integrate across, multiple forms of intelligence. And there are many kind of sub logics under this, but
Mm-hmm.
basically, we want to really push this idea that like for example, parents will come and ask me, do you have, a bachelor's on AI in business or something like that? We have deep AI integration in all our courses, and we have AI tracks in some concentrations and so on. But really, we want students to have that mindset on, how uh, AI is going so fast. Universities are not going to be able to catch up right away, because it takes us at least a year to add a course to the catalog. So we are big believers in experiential learning and learn by doing. This is where this idea that, you know, we want to unlock the student's mind in saying, how is it you would solve a specific challenge faced by industry? And of course, that is really the proven model too, that, we are going to
Right.
talk about later on. We really believe in that, that ultimately education should serve a very practical aim, which is helping solve, relevant problems in
Yeah.
society. And I
Great.
think that is really kind of where our mind's at right now.
So let's break it down into something a bit more tactical for anybody
Sure.
listening. So I mean, when I went to college, it was sit in a show up at 8 or 9 or 10, sit in a room with 300 or 400 people, get a lecture, do that, repeat for 8 to 10 weeks, have multiple tests, and then go on to the next course. What you're talking about is how do you, if you leverage, how do you teach students to leverage AI like they are a marketing manager or a data analyst or even a software engineer? How do they actually understand what are the challenges that, say, a marketing manager or a business analyst or a data analyst would even do, and then how would they actually have a realistic scenario of how to use AI, but in an education scenario?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. You know, uh, uh, I would say in most universities, even today, I think you still have the large, lecture hall. We do also have large, lecture classes. I think in some ways they're needed, but they're not sufficient. You know, so I think you know in 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 our university, what we have recognized is that the co-curricular activities, the clubs, the conferences, the hackathons, these kinds of activities are where students are really really coming in touch with you know
Hmm.
what are the important problems that have to be solved. So we have built partnerships where industry is now coming to us and saying, can you get your students to think about this issue or that issue. And what we find is that we have to connect to practice. So the first idea is connection to practice. So we have literally telling the business world, the biggest thing that you can give us is an understanding of what are the important problems that you're trying to solve. So it is almost as if that the questions are more important these days than the answers, because
Okay.
the cost of ideation is going down. It used to be that you used to hire a student and say, hey, can you come up with some ideas? The student used to come up with ideas on her own or use internet research or something like that. Now the student goes to AI, generates 10 different ideas, but the student has no way of evaluating those ideas. Are those the right ways to solve the challenge? Will it actually solve the particular problem that people really care about, or is it solving something else? So this is
Hmm.
where I think the second thing comes in. That first is connection to practice. Second one is a hands-on orientation. That basically we don't want students to feel like simply solving the quiz is going to win them the game. It's not. So we
Okay.
want them to have this attitude of experiencing something, this attitude of experimenting with something, this attitude of understanding, you know, how is it that we are going to solve something, even if I don't know the tool or if I don't know the AI system. Maybe I learn something and then I solve it. So the bottom line, we feel like, students have to learn at a faster pace and in
Yep.
different and more interesting ways now, but all in the service of solving some interesting problems. So if the external world can help us identify what those challenges and tell us what would be valuable for a company, in terms of, problems that are worth solving, or, I think that is something that can allow us to then line everything up.
Got it. So I guess let's say if you're early in career, regardless of if you're at Cal Poly Pomona, another school, graduated, we see at Proven, we see a lot of master's students who are
Right.
kind of in the job market or looking to get into the job market. Where do they start? I guess you've kind of laid out a framework around recombinant
Right.
AI fluency, but I think do I just study more? Or how do I actually get hands-on, I guess is the question. What's the first domino in terms of how I should start the process of getting great with applying AI towards real business scenarios?
Yeah. So what I advise students is, it used to be that the answer to that used to be certification. Go get industry
Hmm.
certification in whatever it is, SAP, supply chain, management, this field, that field, etc. I think we're in the process of, a profound shift from this idea of certifications to the idea of production.
Okay.
So what we want students to do is produce something. Can you actually build an agent, right? Well, how do I do that? Well, go figure it out. I can give you some resources. maybe you can come up with some other resources. So the first idea is, stop, thinking that what you're getting inside the classroom is sufficient. It is not. It is just a foundation. Other things are going to be needed. And
Hmm.
we used to say the other things could include certifications. Answer is no. Now you know that AI agents are going to be very important in the world. Learn how to build an AI agent, even if it's something very rudimentary. Learn something that will allow you to claim that you have built a small AI agent. And I can assure you that, industry is more going to be more interested in someone who can say, oh yeah, I've learned about this and I've built an AI agent that does whatever it is. It could be something very
Hmm.
silly. It's like
Yep.
it sends a joke a day to this person's network or something. Fine, but at least it's an understanding of what it is through actually doing it, right? So I think this is a big change that we're having to go through, but that is not easy to accomplish because faculty members have their own way of bringing information forward. So I think so the first idea is you know it's not just about certification, it's about production of
Mm.
outputs, including, for example, an AI agent. The second thing is, I think, we have a very interesting group of students who are starting student-run businesses on campus. So we have, for example, a group of students that started an ad agency. They essentially are going around and telling businesses, hey, we're a group of students, can you give us something to do for you that will help you? And literally they're
Wow.
knocking on doors, they're going out, and they're connecting with businesses, and they're actually coming back and telling me that these are the sorts of things that businesses are now seeing. And sometimes it's only
Fantastic.
small businesses where they're able to get in. So
Still.
hustle matters,
Yeah.
even now. And I think the thing that we are seeing is, that students need to network, and I think we are currently seeing the COVID generation, in our classes. These are students who in the very formative years went through COVID, but one of the things that they may have gained a lot of things during COVID, but one of the things that they lost was the art of small talk, the art of interaction and engagement.
Mm.
So this going back to this other big idea that we always talk about in finding jobs, it's not just what it's who you know. So are you connecting with enough business leaders and telling them what you do? Are
Yeah.
you able to hold a small conversation with them without needing flashcards and or notes or anything like that? Can you just ask them questions, listen, engage? And we're finding that is students that practice those skills, and we used to call them soft skills, and nowadays I'm hearing this term human skills, which
Yeah.
is something in a world of human AI collaboration. I think it is kind of probably appropriate, but I think we want students to also build out those skills, because sometimes
Right.
we want them to understand that a business leader might give you an advice orally sometimes because they don't want to put everything in writing, right? So you may pick up a nugget or two talking to them that might change the way you think entirely about a topic, and it could take you in a completely different direction. Okay.
That's great. In multiple of our Talent Scout series, people have been starting to more emphasize the soft skills, collaboration, communication, hustle, grit,
Yes.
because the knowledge is available at your fingertips, literally. Obviously, you need to be able to evaluate what the AI is telling you, but and like the
Yes.
other the other thing I find fascinating now is that what's the best way to learn AI, in my mind, is just to ask AI effectively, how do I build an
Yeah.
agent? And that skill is actually, I'm shocked at how many people don't do that, right? People leverage, the certifications, and they go to Microsoft and they read, which is what we've historically been taught to do. So now
Correct.
it feels like what you're saying is it's much more about how do you leverage these tools? All the information is at your fingertips. So it's much more about I guess, personal initiative, right? In terms of actually wanting to do something and being motivated. So I'm curious how you see that playing out across the broader group, right? I have deep respect for that small group of students that are hustling with the ad agency. I think there are a lot of people that want things to be handed to them. And I think this is kind of there's a divergence that's happening between, I think AI is the greatest thing that's ever happened for people with high agency, quote unquote. And
Correct.
like, can you teach those softer skills of hustle and grit and initiative and motivation? Or do you think those are things that are just inherent to somebody?
Yeah, I mean, this is, there are many stories that I can tell you, but I think what I have seen is that uh, I think it takes a lot for a student. For example, I'll give you simple story I'll give is, I like to reward initiative in students. You know,
Hmm.
so what I feel as I should do as a dean is, if I see a student taking initiative, I need to reward that student. So, and it happens rarely, it doesn't happen very often, but you have a student who will write a nice note saying that, I'm a student, this is what I'm studying, I'm interested in this and this. I noticed this, I want to, I have this idea, can I come talk to you? And every single time that has happened, we have supported that, right?
Wow.
So I think so. And a lot of times students want like a small amount of money to make a trip to a local conference possible, or something small like that. It is not
Hmm.
like they want, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But so I feel like as a leader, every single sign I see of students taking initiative, I kind of go the extra mile. And
Great.
so what I tell my team is, if you see students taking 2 steps, we'll take 98 steps. We'll go to them and help them, but they have to take the first 2 steps.
Yeah.
It's not like, and it's not just about, taking classes. I mean, it's kind of the X factor, that we see in students. I think the second idea is, I think, we're really trying to, revolutionize how the faculty members interact with the students, right? It used to be that
Mhm.
faculty members were used to finite set of knowledge. They thought their job was to communicate that knowledge and leave. Um, we are really trying to, engage the faculty on this idea of what is career readiness. You know,
Mm.
that we have to, judge our success as a professor, as a dean, etc., by whether our students are ready to be, starting a career in the real world. And students like to hear from positions of authority. If they hear the same information from a professor versus their classmate, they're going to listen to the professor and take it at least a little
Yeah.
seriously. So I
Yeah.
think, so the second part of it is that. And I think, uh, one of the things that, this is again, I hesitate to say it because it may sound like a cliche, but we need to create a culture where experimentation is king. you know it is
Yeah.
absolutely, try something. It may sound a little weird, a little oddball, and at the end of the day, I think it's fine, just try it. But you have to put in the work, do your research, try to do it the best way possible. But I think creating this expectation that we can have support for experimentation and space for experimentation in the curriculum, both for faculty who want to try new things and for students who want to come up with new ideas. I think so. To me, it's like two hands clapping. The students can take a little bit of initiative, but you also need to create the organizational and cultural conditions that will enable the student success. I think if both of them
Great.
come together, I think it can be very successful.
So let's switch a little bit to that topic of career readiness. So 5,000 students going through your programs every year. What's differentiated in the job market today, the people that you're seeing being hired now versus those that are really struggling to actually find a role in the job market?
Yeah, so I think the I would say the student segments that get jobs, I can put them in a few categories. I think one category is definitely the high GPA. I mean, the 4.0 students, I mean, the faculty are like going out of their way to promote them to various folks, and especially in areas like accounting, for example, where
Okay.
they value competence, accuracy, responsibility, things like that. The GPA remains an important indicator. The second thing is, I think. We did an AI hackathon this year, as we do every year. This year we had something like 350 students participate, and the projects that they were given were very ambitious. So for example, one of the projects gave them a database of 10 million phishing emails and all the information that comes with it, and they had to create a system that incorporated the insights from this data and do something with it and present it to leaders in
Wow.
cybersecurity. So now
Interesting.
this is not like, give me 5 ideas to do better in Sudoku on ChatGPT. I mean, this is like real,
Right.
kind of heft stuff. So the students that won, they also got cash prizes, but, the company has come back and said, we want to hire you. And so as we
Wow.
speak, they're interviewing. So I think the,
That's amazing.
yeah, so I think uh, so what we call proven results, the students that are taking the risk of participating in the hackathon, that they know nothing about some of these fields, but they're ramping up quickly, and that they're delivering results that are AI enabled or AI supported. I think there's a big interest in that. And I think the
Okay.
third thing is you have uh, just a lot of events on campus. So the student leaders of various clubs, who take the initiative to do things. And again, going back to your idea of initiative, right? So you might have uh, a human resource association group that wants to bring in an alumni panel of HR leaders. You know, those have very positive contagion effects, because people are seeing that as leadership. So they're seeing it as, you're not just you are just doing something. I
Yeah.
think that is the first test, which is like, are you just like going to your classes and going home? I mean, then it's like, okay, in some areas
Yeah.
that might really work if you're at the very top. But for everybody else, we need you to be doing something. We need, okay, you have a
Yeah.
club that is leading something on, you have a legal society, you have, women in technology, you have IEEE society, all those things. If you're doing some activities in those things, I think people really, really, respond to that very well. As they think of that as leadership, they think of that as engagement. And one of the things that we also do, for example, is put students in high visibility roles. If you're bringing in external leaders, we bring in students to interact with them. And what we found is that those that are very personable, that are able to engage people in a conversation. Literally, I was in a setting where the student explained everything that we're going to do today, and her life and the students and so on. And the industry person literally said, you're hired.
Oh my God.
So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
so because this person had just come out of something like
Yeah.
25 interviews where everyone was socially awkward.
Yeah.
So I think we are focused on the AI effects,
Yeah.
but the personality still matters. The way that you
Right.
speak, the way that you connect, and the way that you're able to go through situations in a fearless way and explain to people who are already leaders, you know what uh, what your experience is. People value that a lot.
That's amazing. So, a couple things I hear is it, and we heard this actually from Neil Zuckerman in a previous version,
Yes.
was like AI is a little bit like making the hiring go back to the future or back to the past, right? It's really about those soft skills, and the fundamental things are like, are you a hard worker? Do you take initiative? How well do you communicate? And
Yes.
like ultimately, do I want to work with this person, are actually becoming more important than do you
Yes.
know this special programming language? And the other thing that I
No,
find
no,
fascinating, yeah,
no,
go ahead.
Nick, that's a very important idea, right? Because I think that's very true. In addition to that, we have to be compassionate to the businesses, because many of them are putting up an ad for a receptionist or entry level analyst, and they get 50,000 applications all
Yeah,
written
totally.
using AI. Eh,
Yes.
They don't know how to break the tie. They
Yeah.
don't know the search costs are very high. So you have
Yes.
an ATS system that is using AI, that is going over AI written cover letters and resumes. Uh, and so it is really a mess for companies because they have to invest a lot of money in going over, separating the good and the bad resumes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
these kind of serendipitous connections, the soft skills, the leadership
Yeah.
things, people do respond to that.
Yeah. I almost, the other thing that I find fascinating about what you were saying is that, uh, historically, like when you and I were in college, you go into the Office of Career Services, it was a building. The building like literally had books, and the books had like employer addresses, and they'd say these people are hiring. Go send an email, or not even email. Go send a letter to the vice president at J and Johnson and Johnson at the time.
Right.
Now, it sounds like based on what you were saying, Office of Career Services is, not just about resumes or interviewing. It's actually about how do you leverage all these other things to network and get seen and do a hackathon and all these other ways that companies are looking for signal beyond the resume or beyond the interview because they are getting
Yes.
50,000. So I guess as you think through either like how you're advising students or even the proven process, which is very much do a challenge, record a video, let employers see your thought process, and then get, really lean into AI. How do you think the future is going to play out as it seems like you have experiential learning, employers are looking for broader signal than a piece of paper built by AI, i.e. the resume. What do you think is really going to be the key to unlocking, great job opportunities going forward?
Yeah, I mean that's I mean that's a very big question. I think so. Let me kind of try to take a stab at it from different angles. I think one of the things
Yeah.
that I believe that we are going kind of a redesign of work itself. How do organizations want work done? We have a current system in which an organization is set up in a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. How is that going to change over time? I think it's something that is, we're all kind of have some views on that. So for example, you and I were talking about, note takers in Teams meetings, right?
Yep.
Well, we are now talking about having hybrid human and AI teams, right? So you might have an AI, so we have to train our students to, join an organization that has a hybrid team. Called in and said, hey, you're joining this, and there's this person, and these two other people are like agents that are going to do things. And, so that is a like a mind-blowing concept for a lot of people who want to
Totally.
think through like what is a responsible way of doing it, where I think as organizations, organizations need to be thinking not just about like value and performance, but they need to also think about the ethics of it all. Like, just
Yeah.
in terms of, are you satisfied that these agents are going to assign work the right way, or, follow up in the right way, things like that. But being aware of that, I think is going to be, kind of, really interesting. Uh, I think, especially in the world of technology, we are telling students that they should pay attention to two areas because and let me scope out a little bit. I think we if you look at the last, I would say 30, 40 years, and I went to IIT Bombay in 1984. Number one, course of study in India in IIT Bombay was computer science. Well, that pattern has stayed, very consistent for, through my entire career. Right. I have personally seen it in all kinds of state universities, Ivy League, et cetera, et cetera. Now, for the first time, we have to realize that computer science degrees have been designed to, to produce developers.
Hmm.
Okay. The focus has been on developers. Now, AI's impact has been on, automating the development of software. Right. So what we are saying is to students is if you want to build your career in the technology field today, think of two areas which is going to lead to very stable career paths. One is cybersecurity. We think that that is only going to escalate. I think cyber AI or AI plus cyber security, I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot that is going to happen there,
Yep.
including, kind of, the game theory of, agents gaming each other versus on the defense side, agents kind of looking at the perimeter of an organization's data frontier to ensure there are no breaches. Uh, Many things are going to be new and exciting in that field. And the second thing that we've been talking about is DevOps, which is, you can build the stuff, but what if, intern A wipe coded X, intern, somebody else, an employee has something Y. Well, these two don't connect. And or there are problems. There's data leakage, there's inefficiency, there is inconsistency, and etc. Somebody has to sort of maintain and clean and integrate and so on. So these kinds of things are something that we're advising, because although the large companies say that 30, 40, 50%, depending on what believe, of the code base is already AI generated, we think that AI is at this point generally very well suited for smaller development projects rather than a code base that is mature for a couple of decades, that has 50 million lines of code.
Yeah. Right.
So I think DevOps in one way, shape, or form, cybersecurity in one way, shape, or form
Yeah.
will offer technical jobs, we think.
Yeah.
We also think that it is important to not just say AI, but AI plus. So
Hmm.
if within the business world, we want to talk about AI plus marketing, AI plus accounting, AI plus supply chain, AI plus finance, etc., etc. So the
Yeah.
idea is that there's going to be contextual, AI development. There's going to be contextual
Yeah.
intelligence, which is going to
Now,
be very important.
one thing you mentioned was this concept of a stable job. Like, do you think there are any stable jobs, and how do you prepare people for that future?
uh, that is, it's very interesting. I met this young, a guy today, 4.0 GPA in high school, is not at all clear which direction to go. It actually took some
Yeah.
time off because he said, I got so confused. And he said,
Yeah.
I said, where are you landing? He says, I don't know. But he said, I want stability, is what he said. I was shocked. I was like, really? I mean, I mean, given your academic record, you can go to, many different, fields of study. But the person says, look, I just don't want to deal with all the volatility, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm seeing for the first time business students applying to governmental accounting jobs, for example.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, because
Interesting.
they're saying that if I work for a city government, county government, state government, that is going to be more stable than working for a publicly traded company, because the
Right.
volatility is likely to be greater. So I'm
Wow.
seeing that, people are trying to understand what I call, this kind of, you know, islands of green in a sea of
Yeah.
red. They're
Right.
saying that the broader market is going to have all kinds of turmoil. Can I find, small, protected islands, walled gardens where I can go and, pitch my tent,
Yeah.
and I can thrive in that space. So I
Interesting.
see that as a, job search or career building strategy that
Okay.
that is already happening,
Interesting.
which I think is counterintuitive. So like our,
Right.
and like some of our best students are taking these kinds of things. I had a student tell me he's joining the army. I had a student tell me he wants to go and join LAPD. I said,
Wow.
police? I said, police? And he said, yeah, the salary is 125K plus
Wow.
benefits and so on. I said, okay, I can't argue with that. But so
Right.
it was very interesting to see the directions people are kind of going in.
Yeah.
And I think everybody is trying to find safe ground, and I
Right.
think there are people saying it's not just the salary, it's stability.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's a very, being in the tech industry, that's very counterintuitive from
Yes,
what I see. Yeah, interesting. Well, this was awesome. We're gonna wrap up this kind of the scripted portion with the rapid
please.
fire section. And I'll ask you like a short sentence or a question, and you respond with what comes to mind. And I think we have a very engaged audience with lots of questions. So we'll have the last section will be questions. All right, you ready for the rapid fire, Sandeep?
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Okay. All right. First question, first statement. The number one AI tool every student should learn first is?
I refuse to answer the question. It's not one.
It was
Please
a trick question.
stop saying. I just said AI is not a tool. Stop saying
Yes.
that. Stop
Okay.
thinking like this. Please. This is going to take you down the wrong path. Please. Sorry.
All right. So how about this? The number one thing any student should learn regarding AI or with AI is?
Uh, you know, something that they're very curious about, but they never got a chance to learn. We want them to get what we call adjacent fields of expertise.
Okay, great. The most overrated thing on a resume is?
Uh, uh, you know, it might be, wow. I think it might be certifications, actually. I'm somewhat
Okay.
skeptical of certifications.
Okay, great. In 3 years, the traditional resume will be blank.
Obsolete.
Okay.
I think we will have new hiring models. I mean, this cannot go on, literally.
Yep. Got it. The biggest mistake students make when positioning themselves around AI is?
Uh, they define themselves uh, technically, they define themselves in terms of one or two tools in their mindset, and they don't go talk to people. I know students who spend 5 hours a day applying for jobs in Indeed.
Wow, crazy.
They don't go talk to people.
Got it. All right. Hiring manager is choosing between two candidates, same GPA, same school, same major. Both submit resumes, and then one submits a portfolio with videos, and perhaps has built some things either with AI or without. Who gets the call and why?
The second person, for the following reasons. Number one, the person is willing to put in effort and deliver some result. Now, I may not like the result, but at least there is a series of artifacts I can look at, videos, code, whatever. Um, so I think that is important, that it shows there's a signal that there is effort being put in, at some level of quality. I think, and the second one is problem solving mindset, that it's not simply, picking up tools for tools sake, but, that you're actually developing the muscle of solving problems.
Wonderful. One piece of advice you'd give every student listening right now, something they can do this week.
Build an AI agent and double the number of LinkedIn connections you have this week.
Great. Love
If
that.
you have
And the
200
last,
connections, find a way to get to 400 connections this week.
awesome. Awesome. Love that. And the last question, finish this sentence. The students who are going to win in this economy are the ones who blank.
Who walk into the fire and not run away from it.
I love that. Love it. Awesome. Sandeep, this was wonderful. Let's open it up for questions. Hold on. So I
Please.
believe that there's a Q&A panel there's a Q&A panel, so we're going to start there, and then it will also use the chat afterwards once we get through the Q&A panel. And we have Shailja on, who's going to be helping me.
Please.
Let's
I
see.
will let you prioritize. I tried going into the
Okay.
Q&A. I don't want to do that. I will let
I don't
you
see
and
any
Shailaja
questions
prioritize. Please.
I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Lots of chatter in the chat, but I
Okay.
think
Okay.
mostly around what are the jobs that are built
Okay.
for the future. But yeah, I'll
All right.
take it.
I see one question in the chat from Ferdy asked, will pharmacy jobs be replaced by AI in the future?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I worked with the School of Pharmacy in Seattle as well as here, and I think you may have seen that some of the large chains have now brought in a machine where you can enter your information and it dispenses a prescription. I think the whatever I have seen essentially is all about the changing nature of the pharmacist in society. It is not just about dispensing medication, but will the pharmacy have other obligations in the future? So, for example, the pharmacy might have some data-driven or AI-based insights when you walk in there, and so rather than just saying, Nick, here's your medicine one and medicine two, don't mix the two in this way or something like that, the person may have a deeper health-based insight to share, saying, based on the data that we have, we are seeing this as an insight. You may want to look into this in other ways in order to make sure that either you're safe from risk, for example, heart attack, stroke, et cetera, or, some preventable diseases, can be,
Yeah.
prevented by some,
Yeah.
timely interventions. I think these kinds of, there's going to be a change in the nature of the job of the pharmacist, I think.
Yeah, totally. My wife is a pharmacist, so like more and more there are there are robots who are filling the capsules. They have humans doing the checking to make sure it's
Correct.
correct, and the pharmacist is actually doing more counseling to to the patients, to the customers, and then actually this is probably a negative consequence, but like they're doing more vaccines because these are things that are uniquely human rather than filling bottles with pills.
Right. Right.
Vladimir has a comment. Um, he said, "You mentioned that before AI became so widely used, students had to develop ideas and solutions more independently. This is something that I've noticed myself and I've been very vocal about even as a student. As I transition back into the workforce, how can I encourage my team to think creatively, generate their own ideas, and work through solutions before relying on or consulting AI?"
Yeah, this is actually a very big topic, on how the place of what we would say human and algorithmic creativity. What is the relative place of each? So I think I'll just leave some high level thought process for you. I think people have tried and experimented with very different methods. I think one of the things that I know that people have done is, like, they have created like a period where you're forced to turn off your phones for a short period of time, let's say half an hour, and then, you're given pencil and paper, and then you have to come up with ideas. I mean, so that is, and what is that is typically done is, let's say there is a 3 hour, design experience. Half an hour at some point in that process may be set up this way. So it is kind of mixing it up, a little bit, and I think the second thing is, the there is this kind of view that whatever the AI comes might be in some ways better than what the humans come up with. And I think we need to stop doing that, because I think I see, as a human race, we sometimes are building a subtle, inferiority complex that, I can't be as, smart as the AI. How do we know this? People are now going to AI with all their personal difficulties. For example, for you, Igor, you might have people going to AI saying, my boss wants me to come up with creative solutions before going to AI. How do I convince him, that he should allow me to use AI first? So, I mean, this is where their mind's at, right? So I think understanding that ultimately the kind of next phase shift, or where we are going to go, is human AI collaboration. It is going to be intertwined. But the issue is, how do we keep our humanness in that process? Right? That, how do we, find a way? I was listening to, Vishy Anand, a chess super grandmaster from India, and he said, and chess, of course, AI has played a big role in chess the last few years. But his whole thing is, we have lost the ability to argue with AI.
Mm,
So let us say, in the case of AI in the chess, it comes up with some sort of a solution. Can you really argue with that AI and say, well, I don't agree, and can you tell me why this is better than, we have lost that part, because I think what AI is very good at is just coming up with answers, right?
right.
So in the learning space, I think many of you probably know that there are Socratic elements being now added, where students are not given the answer in case the output is a question. It's like, okay, now I say this and say, okay, well, have you thought of these two other things? Oh, student types in something. Okay, now you talked about these two things. Now explain to me how this is done. Now student explains process. AI judges that. So I think that to me, has a lot of promise. I know the Khan Academy was doing something like this. They have a tutor. I know OpenAI has basically a Socratic mode that allows for this. Claude has taken that one step further. Claude is kind of pretty beloved in university systems. And I think I hope that that's helpful.
Great. Nabil asked a question saying that tech companies are hiring less junior engineers because of AI and automation. How do you see that relating to the future of the workforce? Like, if you're hiring less junior engineers, won't that mean you'll have less senior engineers and there will be less people to mentor people? And how is management, mentorship, and how are we seeing kind of this big gap caused in AI due to like not hiring early in career?
Yeah. No, that's a profound question, actually, because all the data is essentially telling us that yes, technology firms are laying off people. They're not hiring, people. And just this week, there's an article in the Wall Street Journal that CEOs are saying that they have a choice of either laying off people or asking the current people to do more. So these are all not very appetizing, labor market, situations. Having said that, I think we are going through. A big phase where there is some kind of a romantic view of AI that is disconnected from cost in technology companies. Initially, when I was talking to CEO, CTOs, VPs, and all that, they used to tell me, "Oh my God, I had this intern and he was great, and he came up with stuff that would have taken us 6 months." Now I talk to them and they're like, "Oh my God, you cannot believe how fast he blows through tokens."
Right.
So so
Yeah.
the, so
Right.
they are now coming to some sort of reckoning on, wait, I could have paid a developer like a full salary for the level of tokens this kid
Right.
went through in like 2 weeks. I mean,
Right.
come on. I mean, so I think that is one of the forces I see where humans are going to make a comeback. So
Okay.
it's not just this humans in the loop idea that, AI is going to be primary and then humans, just look at the output. I think
Yeah.
the companies are going to have to come to reckoning on cost and basically
Great.
say, what is the true cost of AI in my enterprise? And
Yeah.
when all is said and done, should I have laid off all these people, with
Yeah.
tacit knowledge, with understanding of the pipes and way it all interconnects and so on? So
Yeah.
I think that is coming next, I think.
Okay. Great. Melissa asks a super interesting question. What do you think happens to the 40-hour work week?
Oh, this is a great question. So before that, I have a pet subject that I didn't even get to today, which is that the 4-year college degree. Do we need 4 years for an undergraduate? Or
Right.
can I find ways to use the new intelligence in our society to create, let's say, a 3-year college degree? And what
Right.
happens if we find a way to get to a 2-year college degree, for example?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, that would be a fundamental restructuring of the higher educational process. So,
Yeah. I love
yeah,
that.
the work week, the main issue that I see there is, please remember that I grew up in India where people work half days on Saturday as a norm. So they have a 5.5 day work week that frequently equates to 6. So for them, a 5 day work week itself was, such an amazing thing. But I believe that this is a very important subject that we need to find a way to get to a 4 day work week, I think. And the only way that's going to happen is if we really find a way for human and AI to kind of enmesh and integrate more. And
Yeah.
I think that would, but the accountants are going to look at that and say that in effect, that means that we are paying people more per hour. Uh, that's true. We
Yeah.
would be. So, but at the end of the day, I think that has I'll just, I'm not a, public policy expert, although I am an avid student of it. Um, I think that has a higher chance of happening than universal basic income.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Because people have talked about, let's say 20% of the society is not going to have jobs, 30%, whatever that number is. Do I give all of them UBI? Um, well, I think, instead of that, society is maybe better served going to a four-day work week,
Okay, great. So Dharam asks a question. Do you think people working in traditional software development roles will move over to more product-focused roles, and who will guide the overall product development roadmap? It's an interesting kind of tension between,
Very interesting.
historically engineering and product. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I- so um, recently we were having a conversation on what are the limits of vibe coding, which to me this is the heart of what you're asking, which is, of course, Karapati came up with the term vibe coding. Everybody and their uncle says vibe coding now. Um, so one of the limits we've already talked about is that it can, cost can go up pretty fast. That if especially if somebody is just vibe coding and not getting information about cost, they can just run up the bill. But the other issue is, can someone, truly do something extremely, substantive, like, technical product specifications or prototyping or something like that, entirely using vibe coding? And so far, people that I talk to, they say that, the so-called power generalist, taking on the front end role, in a product management, the chances are low. That person
Okay.
needs to have a higher level of technical knowledge, because, you know, uh, otherwise, something is going to get built and the person doesn't know enough to understand whether it's the optimal architecture or not. So
Yeah.
I think there is kind of a knowledge limit to how far vibe coding can go, and there's a knowledge limit on whether vibe coding can, sort of fundamentally take over from someone who understands the technology side very deeply. You know,
Okay.
I think it's an open question, and I can tell you that there are a lot of skeptics and doubters. That much I can tell
Got
you.
it.
Yeah.
Great. And I think we'll end with this huge question
Oh my
from
God.
Judith. So can you talk more about the ethics of AI use and how do we teach it?
Oh my God, this is a very, very, very big question. In fact, um, I wish we had talked more about this. Now that we have coming to the very end, and um, I think it is it is going to become it already is, but it's going to become even more a central question. In terms of, how is it we center ethics in AI? I see we're coming to the end of time, but basically, I think we have to take, uh, you know, the lessons on ethical practices from everywhere we can find it. You know, I think as educators, I meet students who want to, there are people who argue to me that, in a, that we need to think of the 10 commandments and how do we integrate 10 commandments into AI doing, less harm. For
Hmm.
example, thou shalt not kill
Right.
is a commandment. Now, uh, uh, you know, I think, uh, in particular, like schools of business and schools of engineering and science should become much more comfortable with this idea that kind of a religious principle or a principle from a nature-based spirituality view. Um, I meet people who are very spiritual, who are connected to nature very deeply, who say, wait, this AI data centers are already killing us. And if this scales up, I mean, that's going to become the number one environmental issue of our time. what's our plan for kind of overcoming that? And smaller things like, solar panels and all that are not going to cut it, because there's also a
Mm.
massive water consumption issue. How about the environmental ethics of that? So I think that, every code of morality that we have, that we are familiar with should be, brought in. And I'll end on this thing. I've seen the so-called responsible AI frameworks for some of the larger companies. I think it is very legally oriented and not ethically oriented. They're trying to get away with this claim that, that their obligation is responsibility and not ethics.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is up to us to hold the feet of these technology companies to the fire and say, wait, responsible is not enough.
Right.
We need to take this broader view that if that we need to think of AI that can be truly morally defensible.
Great. Amazing. Thank you so much, Sandeep. This was a fantastic session. Thank you for being a proven talent scout. We're excited to have you as an advisor, and we're excited to share your wealth of knowledge with everybody. So thank you for taking the time.
My pleasure. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, and yeah,
Oh, and
thank you
everyone
all.
should follow his Substack. It's
Yeah, follow my
amazing.
Substack. See you on LinkedIn. And really, we got this. We can
Yep.
do this.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Take care.
All right. Bye. Bye, Sandeep.